Great to have you again. This is the last part of our nervous system notes. This will be pages 12 and 13 in your notes. And today we're going to go over the meninges, cerebral spinal fluid, the parts that protect the brain, the spinal cord, also the circulation of the cerebral spinal fluid. And then we'll cover an autonomic nervous system, the involuntary motor neurons, and also a little bit about aging. Okay, so we did yesterday, actually went over the cranial nerves, the 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Interesting thing, there's actually a 13th, maybe, they call it like cranial nerve 0, and it's called the terminus, and it's located, I guess its origins is a lamina terminalis on the ethmoid bone. I guess this is what helps animals detect pheromones. Cool. Yeah, maybe in humans too, huh? All right, so super cool, rock and roll. We're going to dive in, talking about the autonomic nervous system in a second. Okay, so dura mata is the tough mother. So dura is durable, and mata is mother. So not like a tomato, but like a mata. Like a mata. And that's the outer meninges that lines the skull and the vertebral canal directly, because you don't want your spinal cord or your brain tissue or neurons resting on bone. It needs to be slidey, and we'll talk about that. Now I'm going to skip to the pia mata. Pia means gentle mother. Pia mata, or pia could also mean loving, and it's the one. It's very thin, but it's the one that's directly on the surface of the brain and the spinal cord. So you can't just peel it off. It's really stuck on there. Okay, that middle layer, we call it the arachnoid mata, because it's made of web-like strands of connective tissue, and we'll see it in the picture how it attaches to the pia mata, and it creates this what we call subarachnoid space. So below the arachnoid creates a space between the arachnoid layer and the pia mata, and this was what contains the space for the cerebral spinal fluid to flow and bathe your brain and your spinal column. Cool, huh? So let's look at this picture. It's a cutaway of your spine, and yeah, maybe you might recognize it. This is upraised here, but this you might want to shade, because this is the gray matter. Remember, not mata, not mother, but matter, the cell bodies in your spine. So maybe shade it and call it like it is. That's the gray matter. Okay. The white matter, then, of course, is surrounding it, so you can label that too, just to kind of remind ourselves where we're at. Also, remember that central canal, that also has cerebral spinal fluid flowing through it, so that's super important too. Okay, that central canal runs all the way down that spine too. Another thing that you might want to look at structurally here is some spinal nerves. They're coming out, and then they kind of group together, and we like to call it maybe the roots here, because they're really very prominent. Spinal nerve at the base coming out. And this is still in your vertebral column, okay? Once the motor neurons, remember, on the ventral side, and the sensory neurons on the dorsal side get together, then we call that a spinal nerve, and that's what comes out of the spinal column that we can visibly see on the outside. Okay, so the three layers have been kind of peeled back and exaggerated, so you can see it starting maybe here, the dura. Yeah, dura mata. That's just one T. And then the arachnoid here. And you can kind of see some web-like projections into the pia. So here we will also label the pia. I love using a fake, horrible Italian accent. I'm sorry with this Latin, but it's a pia mata. Okay, sorry. So anyway, this also, this triple layer system extends all the way into the brain. So not just the spinal cord, but all the way around the cerebral cortex. Okay, so this picture here might be a little bit weird because it's a cutaway in another, just a small section here. This is the folds, kind of the gyri and some folds of the brain, smaller folds. So here's your cerebral cortex. Cool, cool, cool. So yeah, your brain. And we can sort of see, we can see the three layers here. Here's the dura. I'm sorry, here's the dura. Pointing the wrong thing. Dura mater. And the arachnoid, and that creates its web projections onto the pia. So let's, I mean, this is all part of the arachnoid, but here's that kind of base of that. Because the arachnoid, the subarachnoid space is this here that's created. So we can label that. Maybe we can label it down here, all right? And that's where the cerebral spinal fluid flows, flowing all the way to the brain. Oh, this is your skin. By the way, if you're wondering, you don't have spikes. This is just supposed to be exaggeration of your hair. And this is your skull, right? And they're showing where some blood flow happens in here through the skin into the skull. But this space is really important, okay? It's a projection of the arachnoid space. So we're going to call this the arachnoid villi. Remember in your stomach, the villi are the projections of the cells lining your intestines? Well, here's the arachnoid projection, the village. Can't do N's. Just don't know why. Weird. Or H's. Yeah, they're similar. Okay, so those projections actually allow cerebral spinal fluid to go into here, and then this is the venous sinus that gets created, and the vein goes through here and picks up the cerebral spinal fluid. All right, cerebral spinal fluid, as we're going to find out, is actually plasma in another location. Simplified. Okay, so it's going to suck that up, the fluid up, and it's going to become plasma once again. So here's your cranial venous sinuses, and that's going to be the recycling system we'll see below. Okay, so label that here. Okay, so maybe you want to put in parentheses that this is the blood vein, because I gotta somehow use this space here, blood vein. All right, blood vein. Okay, so this blood vein, and I think that kind of closes out what we are going to be looking at that picture, okay? Let's look down here, and you can kind of really see the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid through the brain and how it gets to the venous sinuses, okay? How it gets created and everything. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you to please grab colors. You need red and you need yellow. That's it. Okay, maybe you want to pause and grab red and yellow colors. So we want to do a little bit of coloring here. Okay, so first we're going to label the meninges, all right? Just because we just talked about them, and we want to make sure that we know where we're at now. Okay, meninges. Dura. This time, this is the last on here. We don't have space to call stigmata. Dura, period. The skull has been taken away. Okay, so that outer is the dura. And then you have the arachnoid. And then the pia. And just point to the brain because it's so closely associated and it follows the curves of and folds of the cerebral cortex. Pia mater. Super cool. Okay, so yeah, the subarachnoid space, that's what this is pointing to right here then, okay? That's that space for the cerebral spinal fluid. And then we want to let's start to talk about how cerebral spinal fluid gets created. Okay, it gets created in two places of the brain, and it's right in the ventricles, basically, and then the ventricles can carry it somewhere else. Okay, so we're gonna label that here in red because it's the cerebral spinal fluid or fluid. It's just really plasma at this point. And down here, okay. And down here, remember we talked about the choroid plexus? That's what it's for. That's what it does. choroid actually is Latin for vascular or vascularis or something like this. And plexus is like series of strands, okay? A complex. Plexus. Latin. Choroid plexus of the fourth ventricle. Okay, and I put a little red dot, so that's where the blood flow comes into the brain and cerebral spinal fluid is created. Also, label fourth ventricle here, would you? And then there's also that third ventricle too. So cerebral spinal fluid is also created in third ventricle, and we'll label that right here. The choroid plexus of the third ventricle. And, oh, yeah, here's where you label the choroid plexus, though. I'm sorry, this was kind of weird. Up here at the third ventricle. And maybe this is not a great spot. If you could squeeze it in here, that'd be nice. That's where the capillaries are that make the cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, so let's try it. All right. That's not a very good attempt here. Okay, so the capillaries are there that make the cerebral spinal fluid from the blood. Kind of. Okay. Blood plasma. Okay, you can say plasma. I have that in my notes, blood plasma, just to kind of remind us. That's something else here. We'll talk about in a second. Also, the third and fourth ventricles, like there's some cerebral spinal fluid created in the third ventricle. But there's also then, it flows to the fourth ventricle too. They're connected, okay? There's some amount of monitoring of pH and other levels that happens in these ventricles, kind of, they're finding out. So yeah, that pH, the acid would come with the cerebral spinal fluid, and it would be present there and be monitored. Also, note that the hypothalamus is here too, and it's got some blood flow to it and to the pituitary gland, and it also does monitor blood nutrients that way as well. And they're just kind of finding more out about this, so it's kind of cool. So here's your cerebral aqueduct that connects the third and fourth ventricle, and cerebral spinal fluid is going to flow, and it's going to flow, gosh, here in the third ventricle. It's going to come around and down through that cerebral aqueduct. Nope, I didn't. Then it's going to go down. Some more cerebral spinal fluid is going to get created as needed, probably as the pressure requires. And then the cerebral spinal fluid is going to actually go down your that central canal in your spinal column, right? So I just put a little arrow here and say that the cerebral spinal fluid goes down the central canal and around the whole vertebral column itself, okay? And remember, we have the ependymal cells to kind of help wave that cerebral spinal fluid down and where it needs to go. So it has that cilia. Okay, and here's the cerebral aqueduct. Sorry, what am I thinking? I just said that, even though this is subarachnoid. This is just to remind us, this is the subarachnoid space. We already did that. Cerebral aqueduct. Okay, so there's a subarachnoid space allowing the cerebral spinal fluid. It goes around. It goes kind of down and back up the spine, and it's gonna start collecting. It's gonna go to the base of the brain here, and it's gonna go up. You can see the arrows. Also on the back side, it's going to go and bathe. After it's done here, it's going to bathe the cerebellum and other structures and go up into the brain. Not this outer layer. That's for the blood flow. Here, we've reserved that for the vein. Here, cerebral spinal fluid is flowing. I'm just going to tell you that it kind of goes down the spine, and it goes around the brain, and then it's going to go in the outer cerebral cortex, that subarachnoid space, and then it's going to get sucked up by those venous sinuses, okay? Cool. So that's what these are. These are cranial venous sinuses, okay? Brain veins, right? Big vein equals big vein. All right, so the big veins, they don't have a lot of pressure in them because they're trying to use the back pressure of the cerebral spinal fluid to suck up that cerebral spinal fluid and return it to blood plasma. And then the plasma, it can flow next to lymph nodes. It's going to pick up some more glucose, and then it's going to get recycled and go back to some of it, the choroid plexus as needed. And that's kind of that system. And it's systemic. Your body's, you have your liver still working. That's detoxifying. You have kidneys that are working and getting rid of toxins. And then, of course, you have nutrients hopefully flowing through. And oxygen, because your brain needs oxygen. This is how it gets oxygen, not directly from blood flow. We have those cells that kind of act as go-betweens between some capillaries too, for oxygen and nutrients, because your brain really does need oxygen. So this is just one way. Let's see here. So just reminding ourselves, the cranial venous sinuses, they're big veins. That's where the cerebral spinal fluid gets reabsorbed through the arachnoid villi and into the bloodstream. Coo. Oh man, I'm rushing. Okay, I think we need to cover that. We didn't cover it yet. Okay, so veins, they come into the brain. Okay, and we can do it the order that it kind of goes. It goes from that arachnoid villi and that's cranial sinuses here, and it's gonna suck up the cerebral spinal fluid in these little areas here, and that's the veins. It kind of just saying how it wanders into the cranial venous sinus area. Cool. All right, and just remember, it goes. The blood goes to the rest of the body too, and is being monitored, and it's picking up nutrients and picking up all that good stuff. Okay, so that's all I have for this picture. Questions, give me private message comments and stuff like that. Hopefully I can answer them, or if I need to know something, that'd be great. But next we're going to talk about the autonomic nervous system, all right, the involuntary motor neurons. Today, it's what your body's doing. It's doing without you consciously having to direct it, okay? That's part of the peripheral nervous system. And we're called also visceral motor neurons because they carry impulses to organs. Remember we talked about the visceral means organ. We talked about visceral membranes. Also, if you eviscerate someone, you do that thing where all the organs spill out. Okay, fun. All right, so visceral motor neurons carry impulses to organs. They innervate smooth muscle and cardiac, right? So you're not super aware that you're making your heart. You're not really conscious of making your heart beat. Good thing, because I'd forget. And also your glands too. So all those smooth muscles. These muscles will either contract or relax on command, and glands will either increase or decrease their secretions. There's two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. All right, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. You might be familiar with them in psychology and whatnot. So the sympathetic, if you're sympathetic to somebody, taking on their emotions, right? The neurons, these are responsible for your fight or flight, okay? Fight or flight responses to stress and danger. They make the heart rate increase to circulate more blood. They cause the bronchioles to dilate. Dilate. I always say that wrong. So that we can take in more oxygen, because we need more oxygen. We call that vasodilation. For skeletal muscles too. So skeletal muscles then can also get the more oxygen, more blood flow and more oxygen to the muscles, so they can produce more ATP, work harder and longer than normal. Because if you don't have oxygen, you have to do anaerobic respiration that creates lactic acid, and it's also not very efficient. So you want the oxygen there for fight or flight. Also, the liver will convert glycogen to glucose so that we can feed these hardworking cells. Hopefully, because you're sensing that you're going to need to be working hard. You're going to amp up your response to, fight the transverse rex or run from transverse rex. Okay, so we need energy in the cells. Also, it causes your pupils to dilate so that you can see better to respond to what's going on, to the aggressor. Take in more light, heighten your senses. Also, you'll have a secretion of adrenaline. That's what's going to do a lot of these things, or epinephrine too, from the adrenal glands. It's going to, and if you get butterflies in your stomach, actually, they say that's your adrenal glands working. That's how you feel it. You don't always feel the pain or the sensation directly at the organ. You might have referred feeling. So that's that queasy butterflies in your stomach feeling. But it's good because it's getting your body ready to respond to a stressor. If you have a speech to do, it's getting a lot of oxygen to your brain so that your brain's going to work better too. So we need that too. Also, but at the same time, your nerves are going to decrease things that you probably don't want going on right now. They're going to decrease peristalsis. Okay? Because we're like, okay, let's digest later. And they're going to decrease the digestive juices so we don't just end up digesting the lining of our intestines or stomach. Okay? Yeah, during stressful times, we don't need to be doing that. Blood vessels in the skin will also constrict. So more blood is available to your core and vital organs. And your major muscles, so like your running muscles and stuff like that. So those are some things that happen in fight or flight. And what we're finding out is in the olden times when you had saber-toothed tiger that you needed to fight off, super helpful to have this, amazing response and you being heightened awareness. But in our modern times, we don't have stressors that are like there and then dead or gone. We have long-term things like deadlines and tests we have to study for, taxes, I don't know. So you have to be conscientious that your body's going to want to go in fight or flight because it's like, oh, we still have a stressor here. Need to be in fight or flight. You need to make sure, and you don't get good digestion then long-term. It's not good long-term to be in fight or flight. It doesn't help your body repair and do the things it needs to do. So you may have to remind your body multiple times in one day that everything's okay. We're not going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or transverse rex or whatever. Okay. So that's good to do. Remember, whatever works for you is good. But yeah, just being mindful of that is like super important. Being mindful of your emotions, that you're getting amped up. So the parasympathetic is the opposite. That's the resting and digesting. Neurons, and they promote the normal function of our organ systems while at rest, and your immune system too. So that's good because we, don't want to just turn off our immune system. Normal digestion is going to happen. Also, heart rate, breathing rate, size of pupils are going to go back to normal. Yay! These neurons maintain what we like to call the homeostasis of your organs at rest, like your normal levels. The best way to remember the functions of the autonomic nervous system is to think autonomic is like automatic. These neurons are constantly at work to keep us functioning properly. Okay? And you may be able to affect your fight or flight. And then also you affect your parasympathetic, but it's also happening when you don't maybe always intend to. So you just have to be aware of that. It's good stuff. So yeah, maybe you've seen that TED Talk on how stress is actually not bad for you. It's just how you view stress. Honestly, you do need to rest too. It's helpful. It's not like stress is really good for you, but you do need an amount of stress hormones to be able to remember things. Okay, and you do need to get amped up so that you can think straight. Just if your body thinks that it's not good, then it kind of has a spiraling effect. It's funny how that happens. So how you view something is going to shape your body's response to it. So we are very complicated beings. We're going to talk about the developmental aspects of the nervous system real quick. The nervous system, it gets formed in the first month of embryonic development. It's one of the first major structures. This is before most women are even aware that they're pregnant. So any, like, they're saying maternal infection, but they mean like not the common cold and not, regular stuff that we get, flus and stuff like that. Like staph infections or things that are, really altering your chemistry and really life-threatening. Those can affect you, affect the baby, especially the nervous system, which is the most important. Also, any drug use can have extremely harmful effects on fetal nervous system development. Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. The central nervous system, though, it begins as a neural tube that runs down the dorsal median plane of the embryo's body. By week 4, the anterior end of this tube is going to begin to expand, and what did I have that went there? That's hilarious. Oh, hopefully, yeah, brain formation is going to begin. Yeah, don't forget that. The rest of the tube becomes the spinal cord. There will be 4 enlargements in the central canal of the neural tube, and these become the ventricles. So it's just an extension of that central canal. The nervous system regulates all growth and development within the embryo. All right, and signals stuff, and that orientates where the rest of the limbs and organs and kind of go. One of the last areas of the brain to mature, though, and functioning wise, is the hypothalamus, which is why preemie babies have so much trouble maintaining their body temperature, and they need to be incubated because they would have normally not needed the hypothalamus to fully functioning if they were still in their moms. Okay. Nerve tissue has the highest metabolic rate of any tissue in the body, therefore it must have a constant supply of oxygen. Lack of it, or even for a few minutes, leads to death of neurons. A common cause of cerebral palsy is the lack of O2 in a baby's brain. So that's why at the time of birth, like in labor, there's a difficult labor or delivery and things get kind of pinched off and the umbilical cord gets pinched off. Baby's not getting a ton of oxygen and maybe not enough oxygen. So that's why they're very careful about monitoring the oxygen to the fetus, even before labor. All right. And although the brain can oftentimes, the earlier on that this happens, maybe lack of O2 happens, the more likely that the brain is going to recover, probably almost fully. But while we're talking about that, it said, my notes say no new, or no motor neurons, sorry. No motor neurons are formed after birth, okay? So birth, you got it all, you just don't know how to use it yet. You're going to spend your infancy trying to get coordinated and get connected with those motor neurons. So, but the nervous system as a whole grows and matures throughout childhood as new connections are formed. So your learning is basically new connections between neurons that we have. That's what causes the memories to be stored and the processing to be modified. And even though neurons do die as we age, the new connections can always form, and you can learn throughout life. Now, what's not in here is there are 2 types of times in your neurons that you get new neurons. Okay, one of them, like you just said, is before you're born. Okay, the second time actually is about the tween years, 10 through 12, maybe 13, and you get a growth of more of the frontal lobe. Okay, the prefrontal cortex. And then after that, you have the most number of neurons than you'll ever have probably in your at least life outside of your mom, right? Because you had more neurons before you were born. Trust me. The thing I want to tell you is that that neurons, if they're not used before your brain finishes developing or whenever, the neuron signals its own death. It's like, I'm not needed here. So that's one of the good reasons to also want to learn at a young age. And it's funny. You're not really just maintaining brain connections or creating brain connections. You're maintaining the neurons so that you don't lose them. So it's kind of a use it or lose it situation. So that's interesting. Also, drug use, super bad because it kills neurons early. And then you have a lot less to deal with when you're an adult. You have a lot less to use for those new connections. So it really does affect you permanently. And that's why smoking and drinking ages have been raised to 21. It probably should be 25 or not at all, really. Why hurt your brain? It has a hard enough time as it is. So as we age, excuse me, the autonomic nervous system gradually becomes less efficient, especially in its inability to constrict blood vessels. Isn't that weird? This is why the elderly often find themselves feeling lightheaded when they stand up too fast, blood pools in the feet, and maybe have circulation issues. Many of the problems that impact nervous system are really problems with the circulation of blood, like arteriosclerosis. Maybe we want to put down here, reminding ourselves that arteriosclerosis is a thickening of arteries. It's a narrowing, so it narrows. Also, it hardens. It's plaque buildup usually, though. All right, and we get as you age, you also get a hardening and loss of elasticity. Especially happens if you have this arteriosclerosis. And so you can get restricted blood flow, and that's especially bad when it happens in your heart because your heart's pumping the blood and you need that blood. It's kind of a perfect storm. Oh, blood flood. That's cute. All right. Restricted blood flow. So, and they think they used to think that it was from eating fats because the plaque's made out of fat. But folks, that's not what causes it. Fat's good for you, good balance of omega fatty acids, so it's important. It's mostly inflammation. So, I mean, you can get inflammation from diet, from unhealthy diet too. So diet is still very important. But then like Mediterranean diet and other diets that are similar to in populations where they don't have the arteriosclerosis, it's usually like high in omega fatty acid 3, or at least higher than other parts of the world. Something to look into. So you can get arteriosclerosis and high blood pressure then because of narrowed arteries, which means you're going to get less O2 to the brain, and this may lead to confusion, forgetfulness. Sometimes forgetfulness is expected along with rapid problem solving. So it just takes you a little bit longer to think. And you might get a reduction in reaction time and reflexes. But we've said before, exercise helps. Exercise is a great aging reducer, okay? And cardio. American Heart Association recommends now, look up recommendations because they've increased them, okay? And they might keep changing because they're finding out that people need more cardio. So walking around is good, but it needs to make sure that you're getting that heart rate elevated to protect yourself and your brain as you age. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think I may have missed something on the other side real quick about the cerebral spinal fluid that's going to bathe your cells. You know that it does cushion your brain, right? So maybe if you can add real fast, it cushions and absorbs shock, brings nutrients. And of course you need blood flow, good blood flow to be able to do that. To bring nutrients and take away toxins, of course. So yeah, get some good blood flow, get some exercise, and ladies and gentlemen, protect your brain. You only get one, okay? Replacement parts are unavailable at this time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and I hope that goes well for you and that you get all that you need for your notes. Please let me know if you need any help, and we'll work on it, all right? See you until next time. Have a good day.